everyone, and welcome back to Anything Joe's, a collaborative journey through the world of G.I. Joe. My name is Greg Engel.
And I'm Jaren Decker.
And we'll be your host today. Today on Anything Joe's, we're going to get caught up on some news, and we got quite a bit of it. So let's just get straight to it. Irish actor Ray Stevenson, dead at 58. This is from May 22nd. I don't know if it happened on this exact day or perhaps the day before. Ray Stevenson, attached to this podcast because he was most known for playing Firefly, the G.I. Joe Retaliation movie, passed away and was a tremendously good actor. This really hit me pretty hard, I've got to be honest. Another reason he's on the show is because I genuinely followed and enjoyed this man's career ever since I saw him in Rome, the HBO television show. And of course, also, he's well known for being the Punisher in Punisher Warzone, a highly underrated superhero movie. People give it a lot of crap because it's a little too cartoony, but it's very consistent with the comic book that it's based on at that time. I think he did a great job in it. Jaren, have you ever seen Rome, first of all?
I have not seen Rome.
It's exceptional, and I recommend it. Rome crawled so Game of Thrones could run, basically. Like, it really captures a really great time in history, is super historically accurate, but leans into the truth when they can. It got some exceptional acting in it across the board. He was in a bunch of other stuff, too. I just recently watched Black Sails, which is a pirate drama. It's kind of similar. It's got Spartacus vibes, and he played Blackbeard, a.k.a. Teach, in that, and I was surprised to see him. And of course, he was going to be in, the new Star Wars series. He did voice work for the Star Wars animated shows. Yeah, was a really amazing actor, and I'll miss him. Did a really good job as Firefly. I was really excited when he was cast as Firefly because I thought, okay, he's kind of the appropriate, he's a little older than you would expect, which I thought was fun. He did a good job playing him off. I don't know. I thought he did a really great job. I will miss him tremendously. He was a very, very good actor that I think didn't get a lot of credit. He was in Thor also as one of the other gods.
Yeah, he was one of the Warriors 3, one of Thor's buddies.
Rest in peace, Ray. You will be remembered. I've been seeking out movies of his that I had never seen before just to kind of fill out the roster of things that I had seen him in because, like I said, I enjoy watching him, and I've been checking through those the last little bit, kind of in celebration of him.
Well, if you ever want to watch another adjacent Game of Thrones show, there's the Vikings show, and he was in it in its later seasons.
Right on.
Are not as good seasons, but he was phenomenal in it. I felt like he had more to give than he was allowed to give on the show.
Yeah,
and him and the wrestler WWE superstar The Edge, they were both in it at the same time. Now, he acted the crap like he did way better than Edge did, but, it is what it is.
He had quite a bit of range. He's been completely different in almost every role, I feel like. In Rome, he's kind of like a guy that doesn't have a good handle on his temper. He plays Titus Pullo, and he keeps getting kind of drafted into situations that his mouth can't get him out of. He's very funny in it. He's a great character. The new HasLab is set to be announced tomorrow at the time of this recording. Or I guess it's so late now, it'll be later today. I'm just going to go ahead and go on the board. And this is a risky gamble for something that will deliver almost 3 full days after it's been announced. But it's going to be the Dragonfly. If you haven't seen the evidence on it, there's really one compelling piece of evidence, and that is that someone found the number 24. And that number 24 matches up to a decal that went on the original Dragonfly, like on the one of the rear blades or something. And that's pretty much all I needed to convince me. I think that it will definitely be the Dragonfly. Surely it comes with Wild Bill. And if we're using the Hiss tank as the blueprint, we will assume there are at least 1, 2, potentially 3 other characters to be included. And probably some other, add-on pop-ons. Jaren, I'm going to open the floor up to the HasLab discussion. First of all, do you agree that it will be the Dragonfly, or do you think it will be something else? And regardless of what you think it will be, what would you like to see? What would you like to see on the execution? What would you like to see as the add-on items? What do you hope the price point will be?
Well, I think it almost has to be the Dragonfly at this point. That evidence is pretty compelling. All the stuff in the past that it was kind of shown, but not really, and that might have been a leak, and who knows. But I was hoping for like the Mobat or something a little more land based. I don't know why. I just thought it would be cool to have tank versus tank, but the Dragonfly I feel like makes a little more sense. As far as like stretch goals and unlocks, I don't care for like different weapon attachments like they did for the his tanks. That doesn't excite me. What does excite me is the figures. So if you could give us, I don't know, give us an airborne, I think that would be a great one to add on to as like a stretch goal. Maybe, just for the how funny it would be, just give us another Snake Eyes, but like give him like a helicopter helmet just because. I think that would be hilarious to see people react to. I guess as far as I would like at least to have 3 figures and then maybe something like a transporter, like something you could hook onto like underneath of the Dragonfly. Something like that I think would be kind of cool.
You mean something to actually move it around or tow it or...
No, like something like for like the cable, like you could drop the cable and like pick up. Something like that would be kind of cool. I know it's not the Tomahawk, so you're not going to have any actual like big things being carried in the vehicle, but something like that would be kind of cool. As far as price, I would like it to be a little cheaper than the Hiss tank. I know it's most likely not going to happen, but I would love for it to be like $250. That would be like my dream.
I'm thinking in terms of space, it's certainly going to be longer than the Hiss tank, but does it use more plastic or, whatever? Does it use more material than the Hiss? Because the Hiss is kind of like a big chunky square, right? But the Dragonfly is kind of like a stretched out longer piece. I feel like it would probably be comparable. I know the Dragonfly will take up more space overall, but I don't think it particularly uses more resources. Now, whether or not Hasbro will prey on their audience to be like, it looks bigger, so it costs more, is anybody's guess. But yeah, I think if you wanted it to be cheaper, and as long as they don't include as many figures, I think that's feasible. And if the Hiss tank comes out and they go, it's $300, and everybody goes, oh, that's a lot. And then by the time it's over, they're like, okay, well, I got this, I got 3 figures, I got add-ons, etc. It feels a little bit easier, right? But the reality is that all of those things encompass the full bulk price. A $300 Hiss tank by itself was not going to attract a lot of people. But a $300 Hiss tank that includes 3 figures and all these extra things, it starts to balance out the value of it. So I feel that the same way. If you drop the HasLab at $250 but you secretly have made one less figure that you're going to have to include later on, I think that would probably be the right stretch overall. I want to also, before I hand it back to you, want to say that in terms of figure selection, I think Airborne is definitely the second, the next best bet, or a Ripcord. I wouldn't rule out a classified failsafe, which would be crazy decision making on someone's part, but he's already there, right? They already own it. Why not? But other than 2 people, pilot, co-pilot, I don't really think you have to have anybody else unless you make some kind of like tech that is, or a mechanic that works on it, basically. Otherwise, you got a third guy that's only going to hang onto the skids or the rope or something kind of silly like that. But yeah, Airborne would be my first choice after Wild Bill. Ripcord would be probably my next choice after that. Any of the flight specialists, those are just my 2 go-tos, right? Because they're the most popular. They haven't been made yet. And so
maybe they kind of lean into their little social media thing. How they've had like all the, the classified details coming between like Destro and Cobra Commander or whoever. Maybe they give us like a stretch goal with maybe like Cobra logos and maybe a Cobra pilot. That would be cool.
You could do a Tigerfly, right? Because that's a real thing, the Tiger Force Dragonfly, and just throw a sticker sheet in there. Although that's probably more likely to be some kind of like repaint they do down the road anyway, where they try to milk it for all it's worth. Anyway, so I guess we'll move on. By the time people have listened to this, it's already come out. We've already seen it. We'll have to talk about it a second time anyway. But those are the things I'm hoping for before the reveal later today.
Maybe we'll get lucky and they'll just be like, it's actually a badger. Here you go. Hashtag anything Joe's.
You're using the word lucky in the incorrect phrasing. Here's a new badger, $300. is more G.I. Joe adjacent, but it lives in the same sandbox in my world. So if you'll indulge us for a minute, I wanted to talk about ROM, the greatest of the Space Knights, returns to Marvel Comics in all-new omnibus collection. Starting next year, new ROM, the original Marvel Years omnibus collections, will reprint the entire comics run of ROM for the first time ever, plus a brand new facsimile edition of ROM #1 on sale in September. So, ROM was one of the many licenses that was acquired by IDW that flipped back after they basically lost all the good stuff. And this is the first time that ROM the Space Knight has ever been reprinted in a trade paperback ever, period. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it on the show is because if you remember the history of the G.I. Joe trade paperback, which is turbulent at best, rarely gets the full run finished, and the one time it has gone from start to finish, those later trade paperbacks have quadrupled in value pretty quickly, pretty aggressively. So I'm bringing this up as a public service announcement that if you are interested in reading ROM, you think you might have an interest in reading ROM sometime in the future, or you think this would look good in your, Hasbro Extended Universe collection, get ready for this. It looks like it's going to be launching around January. Then the facsimile edition comes out this September. So, yeah, I'm going to pick this up. I've never read ROM Space Knight. I am really only tangentially familiar with ROM through his time spent in the Hasbro Revolutions universe, where he shared time with G.I. Joe and all the other properties that Hasbro chose to use in it. But I'm interested in it because of that. And obviously, it's a Marvel property that was co-founded with Hasbro that I have not really had much experience with, much like Micronauts, which I've been trying to get into lately. I'll couple that with Jaren. Oh, so first of all, Jaren, I'm going to assume I'd be shocked if you have any experience with ROM the Space Knight at all.
The only thing I think I've ever seen of it is, don't you have the box set that is like the crossover?
It's a tie into that comic book universe where they chose one character from each universe and made them, and ROM and the Dire Knights, which I think are the guys that they hunt, or 2 figures they got included in that set. Which, again, makes me even more interested in reading it because I already have a G.I. Joe scale figure of him.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know about him.
Okay, so we're in this together. Look for our new podcast, Anything ROMs, where we discuss the history of ROMs. No. So, yeah, I wanted to bring it up because I do think it'll be rare. I think it will go out of print, relatively quickly. It's got a very select audience. So, just a heads up, put that on your radar. I would be a poor host if I didn't tether that into the fact that this is a former IDW property that has gone back into the hands of Marvel. So what is the likelihood that Marvel has reacquired the rights to their own original G.I. Joe stuff? And I would have to say that at this point, I guess I won't rule it out. If they took the time to do whatever licensing is required to reprint ROM, it stands to reason there's at least a chance that they'll delve into their own back catalog for G.I. Joe and kind of unfortunately start yet another reprint of the original run, which I have collected or started to collect at least 3 times at this point, and don't have a complete collection in any format because I refuse to pay for those later volumes that I missed out on. But I want to throw it out there that, it's not outside the realm of possibility based on this evidence that they could be going back there. Third news item that factors into this story. Man, what a professional host I am. Is Larry has announced that he has been booked to speak at San Diego Comic-Con this year, which hints at the possibility that, short of an actual G.I. Joe panel, he could be there to announce or perhaps co-present whoever the new publisher is, the release date for 301, maybe even show us a cover or give us a tease of it or something. So that's all kind of coming together at once. I do feel like whatever's getting ready to happen, we're getting ready to find out. So we just got to hang in there a little bit longer. It has been surreal being like, oh, should I go get my comics? No, because there's nothing out that I collect anymore. I've used to be the hardest comic book collector of all time, and now I have no monthly books that are regularly publishing. Even Saga, which is the other book I pull, is on hiatus. We'll talk a little bit more about comic books on our recent acquisitions, because I got something in that is very exciting for me, but I want to get it all grouped together like the good host that I am. New end credit scene leaked for the end of the new Transformers movie. So let me just go ahead and say up front that they found I don't know how this information leaks. Somebody leaked a script. Somebody was on stage when they were filming, and they just start telling all their friends, I guess. No respect for the Hollywood industry. So anyway, what we're going to talk about is the news we know about the end credit scene for the new Transformers Rise of the Beast movie. If you're a hardcore Transformers fan, if you don't like having the end of movies that you're going to watch, talked about, then give us about 5 minutes. Skip ahead about 5 minutes. That's all we're going to need. I'm going to read what the description is. We're going to talk about it briefly. I'm going to look at our recording thing now just to make sure we don't go over 5 minutes. All right. The premiere for Rise of the Beast took place in Singapore earlier today, and it was followed by a news conference where all kinds of questions were asked and answered. You can see the full conference here thanks to Reuters on Twitter, but here's a breakdown of the more spoilery stuff. There are no Decepticons in the film. Don't care. Film is officially said not to be a reboot. Great. Lorenzo di Bonaventura gives a really reductive take on Ironhide. Don't care about that either. This is the part I do care about. The end credit scene is a hint to a future crossover between Transformers and G.I. Joe. Okay, so that's not much in and of itself, right? But just a couple of days after that, Geek Culture went ahead and wrote an article, or had an article said Transformers ended up setting crossover with another toy franchise, and they went into much more detail about the actual ending, which we're going to talk about right here. At the end of the movie, and after stopping Unicron and his minion Scourge down in Peru, Noah Diaz, played by Anthony Ramos, returns home to New York and continues his job search. The film shows him entering a warehouse where the ex-military electronics expert sits with his interviewer, played by Michael Kelly. The interviewer notes that Diaz's resume is thin, and when Diaz tries to embellish his recent experience working with the Autobots and Maximals without outing his newfound friends, the interviewer reveals that he knows all about the recent world-saving exploits of Diaz and his giant friends. Diaz is surprised, but still keeps his mouth shut until the interviewer hands him a card and says he wants Diaz to work with his team. The interviewer then stands and touches a shield-shaped plaque hanging on the wall behind him. The wall then moves to reveal a large military facility/warehouse, where audiences can see a futuristic jet being assembled in the back. He then steps into an open lift and descends into the warehouse. Diaz also looks astounded at what was just revealed and turns the card over to see a logo of a falcon's head and a star and a shield-shaped emblem with the words G.I. Joe under it before the credits roll. So obviously this eagle-based logo is a very familiar imagery. It's kind of like the G.I. Joe logo as designed in the cinematic universe. It's bled over quite a lot over the years. I don't hate it, but it really makes you think of the movie specifically. So it looks like they're merging the two universes, or they're at least setting up the hope. Hey, sorry guys, we couldn't get a G.I. Joe movie off on our own 2 feet. Is it okay if we just tag onto your potentially good movie? Is basically the gist of it. Jaren, what are your thoughts on a Transformer crossover with the G.I. Joe universe?
I mean, honestly, I'm a little surprised that The Rock just didn't come back, because he's apparently going back to, spoiler alert for Fast 10, going back to the Fast and the Furious franchise. So after he failed to shift the balance of power in DC, seems like he's just kind of running back to where he's been. So, surprising that it's not going to be The Rock, but I guess it could still be. G.I. Joe is great, but if you really, how are they really supposed to exist in a world with Transformers? It's a little hard to rationalize, I guess. But then again, they did a good job of, in the first couple Transformers movies, showing those army guys who were just basically rip-off G.I. Joes. So, I guess it could work, but I would have been okay if they just continued the story of Snake Eyes, the origins. I think I like that movie more than just about everyone else.
Do you think the play here is to play off of Snake Eyes' origins and bring in the original people that acted for that and just be like, all right, now they're working with you guys? Or do you go back and you say, hey, let's go back to the Retaliation universe, everybody. We want to continue that one. Or third option, we got to go all new.
I feel like if they're going to go back, we're still not going to see the Henry Golding back as Snake Eyes. Just because he's going to have his helmet on, and you're not going to pay someone like Henry Golding to wear a helmet the whole time. So I don't think we'll see that Snake Eyes again. I could see it honestly going either way, but I would prefer them just to try it fresh. Just keep throwing stuff at the wall. Something will hopefully eventually stick.
I guess that's the safe bet, right? Is that you go, we're going to put them in the movie a little bit, and we're going to see how fans react to it. If they love it, maybe we can pick the part of it that they love, and that'll be our spinoff. It's basically the classic DC formula. They're like, oh, we put Wonder Woman in this Batman Superman movie. How do you guys feel about that? Okay, great. Now we put her with a bunch of other people. Here's a guy named Aquaman. How do you feel about him? Okay, great. Now we're going to make his own movie. So it's basically that. I think it's that mentality where they're like, we really want to keep this alive. We hear people talking about it. We just keep messing them up. So we're going to try some stuff, some smaller stuff, and see how it sticks. I'm not really enthused about this at all because I'll inevitably go watch it, but I just don't care what's going on with the Transformers at all. So I'm just going to see it to see what G.I. Joe does. How many of them get stepped on, basically? Because yes, you're right. It takes like a whole fleet of G.I. Joes just to defeat like a Bumblebee, one little tiny little guy.
See, I like the Transformers movies, but I'm not a Transformers fan. I think it's just because they hit me at the right time. Like the first one came out when I was like, I don't know, 12. So I was like, "Ooh, cool, big robots," and Megan Fox is very attractive. So
that's going to wrap it up for our news. We're going to come back to the HasLab, obviously, when we see it later today. And we'll try to have a short reaction up, so you don't have to wait for a full next episode. And because I'm excited to talk about it, obviously. I mean, I would be more excited if my His Tank was already here, but at least I already paid for that one, so I don't have to think about it in those terms, which is important. Let's skip over to recent acquisitions because I got a couple things in to talk about.
Recent acquisitions.
So I got a couple things in, and I want to talk about them, as is my norm. I got my Mezco Destro in, the 112 Collective. That's been fulfilling for most people at this point, I think. I ordered it from Big Bad Toy Store. It came in a little behind everybody else's order, which was fine. And this is the first Mezco figure I've ever owned. So I did not know what I was getting into. I just was, just like most of these, Super 7 Hiya toys, I'm always like, I got to try a couple of them to see how I feel. Or those 3 zeros, which I don't care for, I bought a couple. I don't hate them, but if I'm going to go all in or not. And buddy, let me tell you, this Destro winning me over left and right. It's a really, really good figure. It poses really well. He's got a lot of interchangeable hands and parts. He's got helmets for different concepts of Destro. Does your Destro wear a helmet that doesn't move like a normal helmet would? Is it more like a liquid metal like in the G.I. Joe movie? Does it look like the cartoon where it is a helmet that somehow makes facial expressions? They covered all the bases, which I think is very cool. He's got like a little briefcase that lights up. He's got you can attach rockets to look like they're firing off. They're translucent, so if you put a light up behind it, it gives it like a little bit more pop. The base is posable and like has one of those like claws that kind of grabs him by the torso, so he's easier to pose. My biggest issue with this figure going into it was he has real cloth, and I'm a real stickler for that type of stuff. It hardly ever seems right, but this is the first figure I've ever seen that it's so good. All of the fabric that he's wearing is tight on his skin like it would be, so it's kind of just like stretchy, but it's hard to explain, but it's just like a tight, perfect fit, and it looks awesome. I don't think it's better than non-material, but I can acknowledge that it is perhaps more realistic, and they did such a good job with it that I'm all for it. I immediately went and pre-ordered the Firefly one. That's the same one in the series because they did the full reveal and opened up pre-orders for that on the 31st. So I was like, yes, I'm going to at least do one more because this one is great. But realistically, I kind of want them all at this point.
Do you have the Snake Eyes pre-ordered?
I do think I pre-ordered the Snake Eyes. I don't actually remember. It's been so long. I've got to go back and look and see if I put it down. If I didn't pre-order it, I do want it. But at this point, yeah, all the ones they've shown, I'm going to back up and make sure I get because they are very, very cool. We'll need somewhere kind of on their own to display once, the 3 or 4 that have been announced come out. But yeah, I love it. And it's not cheap at about $100 a pop. And the scale is comparable with a classified scale. They're just about the same height, give or take just an inch or two.
Does it look like drastically out of place because of the quality difference when you set them next to each other?
Maybe not drastically out of place, but these are so much more eager for photography. I feel like they are almost striking a pose right out of the box. It seems like, but they don't look out of place in terms of quality. They look out of place in terms of design. They don't look, this Destro and the other Destro side by side don't look like they came from the same universe. Essentially. I don't think it would be a good photographer could make it work. I can't, but somebody that knew what they were doing, I think, could use these with classified scale. And it would add a little bit of pop to them for sure. But yeah, I'm happy with it overall. I want to buy the rest of them. I think this one is a hit. Really, it really does deliver. even for the the high price point. The exact opposite the way I feel about those 3.0s. Those 3.0 figures are like, I don't know, 12, 14 inches tall. They're huge, but the articulation is bad. The joints aren't good. Just the material itself doesn't feel right. And those are upwards of 150 to 175. Not worth it for me. Okay, so one of the other things we both got this in, is we got our classified rock and roll in. Looks like classified rock and roll has been the one figure from this new wave that's just out and about for whatever reason. He's already in the wild. And Jaren and I both got ours. Now, I have to be upfront and say that I have not opened mine yet. I've been a little busy this week. But Jaren, you opened yours and looked at it. What's your thoughts on it now that you have it in hand?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I always love every figure as soon as I open it up, so take this with a grain of salt. But I absolutely love this figure. The alternate hands, it comes with like the rock-on hands with the tattoo on the back, so you can like put it over his face so it looks like a skull. I think that's just one of the funniest like little details that they did. I think it's awesome. He's got like hang tin on his helmet. The face sculpt is okay. It's not the best of the line. It's not Dusty or Falcon. So, it's there in the middle. As far as accessories go, I think he comes with probably the right accessories. This is one of the few times where I was like, you know what? I would have been okay with a screaming face as like an additional head, not as a replacement head. I don't want him to be screaming. But I'm like, if you give him the rock-on hands, it looks a little weird for him to be rocking on with just like the most blank stare that you'll ever see. So, that is what it is. But it works really well. It's really well articulated. I still love the color scheme that they did. I know you originally weren't the biggest fan of it, but I love the color scheme with like the tan shirt. Once these come in like retail, if they go on sale, I'll probably grab a couple to switch heads, and I'll probably have to switch arms as well, just so you don't have a bunch of guys with the exact same tattoos. I think it's a really great figure. It's another one that they knocked it out of the park while not doing just a perfect one-to-one recreation of the original rock and roll figure. I loved it.
I saw a guy online that was unhappy with the tattoos, and he just took it to himself to remove them all. And I have a lot of respect for that. I've taken a bit of an interest in that aspect of it recently because I've had to doctor two of my own figures. I stole both of these ideas from great innovators off of Facebook, but essentially I took my Falcon and I bought a second Dusty. I removed all of the paint decals from Dusty's face, right down to his lipstick, basically, and popped that on the Lieutenant Falcon, and it looks great. And then somebody else had showcased that they bought a Walgreens exclusive Moonstone and removed her. She has like a Zartan style makeup scheme. And with it, I took a toothpick and some nail polish remover, and I very gently removed that tattoo and put that on my cover girl, and it looks great. So I like that there's a little bit of customization involved. They're like, well, here we included it, but it's really not that hard to take off if you don't like it. So keep that option in mind. Maybe do just a little bit of research, but as long as you are patient and you have the right supplies, that stuff comes off with just a little bit of hard work. If I'm willing to do it, it's not hard because I'm pretty lazy when it comes to this stuff. And I've had good results off of both of those. They both worked out just about as well as I could hope.
Speaking about kind of customization and things like that, I want to give a shout out to Patrick Davis, friend of the show. He, met him at Winterfest, and I believe he is coming to Kentuckiana. He sent me a few photos of the figures he's been tinkering with. He's been using like the Winter Soldier Captain America body, and then, Infinity War Captain America, and then like just some other figures that he's been tinkering, and he sent me some photos, and like it's amazing what you can do when you have talent. I couldn't do it, but he's doing like some really cool like kit bashes and stuff that are just, you get all these figures and you can just use these pieces in a multitude of ways. So it's really cool. But shout out to Patrick, because he sent me quite a few photos of some really cool looking figures he did. Like he did a blue suit Baroness, which was really cool.
I hope Patrick is coming to Kentuckiana because he has a jet for me and I owe him money for it.
Ah, yes, he's got that one.
Patrick was kind enough to message us, and he found the con exclusive Vector X30. I might be butchering that, but it's essentially the repainted Sky Striker to look like the Battle Force 2000 Mavericks plane.
The Sky Striker? I thought it was a Conquest.
It is a Conquest. Sorry, I forgot they passed that stuff off, but it is a Conquest repainted to look like Maverick's the Vector, and it's a great deal. So I'm really looking, if I get nothing else, which is extremely unlikely, I have that to look forward to, and I'm excited to add it to the collection. They announced a guest for Kentuckiana, their 10th year, and I could not be more pleased. It's Ron Rudat. Obviously a name that everybody in the community should know, and Ron is somebody that I have never had the privilege of meeting in my many travels as G.I. Joe collecting, so it couldn't line up any more perfectly for me. I'm hoping to reach out and talk to him about getting a pre-show commission. I'd like to get a sketch from Ron. I did struggle, I thought, well, what should I have Ron sign, because he can, anything that he drew, which is so many things, he is, within the reins of having him signed. But I thought, what's something that he legitimately worked on? I'm still struggling with it, essentially. I'd like to have something that is an original, something that he originally put out, which would be like a mint on card figure, right? But Ron's work is mostly in the early to mid 80s. There's some stuff that bleeds over later, and those mint on card figures are very expensive. For example, most people know that Ron got his likeness included in the character of Leatherneck, a great character. But a mint on card Leatherneck is like $400. So I'm thinking instead I might ask him to do a commission, an original piece of art, and I would choose Leatherneck as that character. Not only a character that is special to Ron and me because of that, but is a character that I've never had drawn in my sketchbook before. And I've been challenging myself to get commissions of G.I. Joe characters that I've never added before. I lean into a lot of my most enjoyable characters and I kind of get stuck in a rut, so I'm trying to get out of that. If I'm remembering correctly, you had a brief opportunity to meet Ron at the Joe Fest that you were at. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, it's crazy that I got one up on you in something G.I. Joe. It's insane.
Well, it's not a competition, Jaren. Wink.
Well, it's not. But when I lose every single one except for one, it makes me happy that I finally got one. No, Ron was like the nicest guy. It was absolutely incredible to get to talk to him. That's when I met, I believe, Jamie Sullivan as well. But, and I had my kid there, so it was kind of fun. They were talking to me about kids and, their family and my family. So it was a really great opportunity. I almost feel like I have to bring a kid to Kentuckiana now, but I'm not going to, because I like having that time to just hang out with all of our friends and not having to be in dad mode. So, sorry.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Sorry, did you get a print from Ron? Is that what you do have?
I got that, and then he did like a Cobra logo on a piece of paper.
Do you have any interest in getting something signed at Kentuckiana this year, or are you good with what you have?
No, I might get something signed. Just depends on if I can find something cool. Even if I just buy something he has there, I'm not as, I don't need something that fancy. My collection's a lot more working class collection than yours, Greg, so I don't need original artwork.
I just got that great all-in set of posters from 3D Joe's, which has multiple, it has file cards, it has card art, it has promotional art. I might pick out one of those that has a significant amount of Ron-influenced art, even if it's just a bunch of the file cards, and have him sign that. That would be a good motivation for me to get it signed. But I'm definitely bringing him something, at least one or two things that I think will be, that are tethered to his career with the product. I don't want him to just be like, here, sign this box of cereal that you didn't do the art for, just has a Cobra logo tucked away in the background somewhere. So, yeah, if you've met Ron in the past or have, dreams of meeting Ron, perhaps you're going to Kentuckiana this year to meet him. I'd love to know what you've gotten signed in the past or what you think a great item to get signed by him is. I'm open to all things. If I don't, I try to look at opportunities like this, like, well, you might not ever have another chance. So make sure you get the right thing signed. And that's worked out for me pretty well over the years. I've gotten some great stuff signed. Speaking of, man, I got great like flow on this episode. I could just merge everything together. Speaking of getting great key items signed and never regretting it, I want to talk about another recent acquisition. Jaren and I have, besides G.I. Joe, I think have connected a lot recently, especially this year, because Jaren has started to get into comic books. And I am a huge comic book collector. I've been collecting comics off and on since I was in middle school. There was a point in my life where I had over 10,000 comics in my collection, which to some of you is probably like, whoa, and to others, like, it's just a drop in the bucket. Comic book collecting is a vicious hobby. And I've spent a lot of time over the years, especially since we had our daughter. I've been trying to basically thin that collection out every year. I try to make it more and more just books that are truly, or runs that are truly impactful to me. Well, anyway, obviously I have and always have been a huge G.I. Joe comic book collector. I've been collecting it almost since the day I picked up the first comic. There's been very few pieces that I've missed. There are lots of, variant covers or whatever. Anyway, you might remember on a recent episode that I was fortunate enough to win 2 graded copies of G.I. Joe number 300 from Jamie Sullivan. He was selling his last raw copies off, and one lucky person won graded copies. So I won a graded 9.4 of issue 300 signed by him and graded, and then I also got a graded number 300, the Virgin cover. That was a 9.8. These are the first 2 graded books I've ever added into my collection in my entire history of collecting comics, because I come from an era where when you met a person that worked on a comic, you just had them sign it. There was nobody there to take a witness or any way to authenticate your signature. So something I'd been struggling with was, my favorite and most important comics sentimentally are my G.I. Joe comics. And I wanted to protect and, kind of showcase, I guess, the books that are the most important to me. And also I want to protect them and somehow identify if something ever happens to me. I want my wife to be able to just go, well, you got these graded. These are obviously the most important books. I should sell those first. That will help us get out of the crippling debt he left us in from buying so many G.I. Joes before he died. So the book that I picked was to send in for the very first book from my entire collection is a G.I. Joe number 1. Now, the G.I. Joe number 1 that I have is by far not the most valuable book in my collection, but it's in good condition. As a matter of fact, as the story goes, of the original 155 books, G.I. Joe number 1 was like one of the last 5 books I bought. I don't know why it took me so long to buy number 1, but I do think for a long time when I was collecting, I simply forgot that I hadn't acquired one. Growing up, the book to get was G.I. Joe number 2, because it had a substantially lower print run than G.I. Joe number 1, and they didn't expect it to be the hit that it was almost immediately. So I think number 2 was like a $20 to $30 book when I was young, which far exceeded the cost of any other book out there. So I think I skipped number 1 because it was not a very expensive book at the time, thinking I'll get one eventually. Well, cut to, I want to say 2013, roughly, which is when Larry was finally starting to do comic book shows, and he was doing one in Louisville, Kentucky, which was my hometown at the time. And I thought, great, finally an opportunity to meet Larry. I'm going to pick out, 10 to 20 books, which was not as insulting then as it is now. Back then, 20 years before that, you would stand behind somebody that would bring an entire run of Uncanny X-Men for Chris Claremont to sign. Poor guy. So I had picked out 10 to 20 books to get signed. I thought, again, this might be the one and only time I meet Larry. I got to make it count. So I brought all the heavy hitters. I got a 21. I got a 155. I got sketch covers that he's done. Just every rare book that I thought I would want Larry to sign, I pulled. I did not have a number 1, and I thought, this is unacceptable. If I'm going to meet Larry, this is probably the book that I would most want him to sign as a number 1. So I went online, I found a pretty darn good looking copy, and I thought, all right, this looks pretty good. The price it was less than $50, which maybe was a lot 10 years ago, actually, for a G.I. Joe number 1. But time was of the essence, and like I said, it looked good. So I got it in, and it did. It looked very good, quite frankly. My comic book collection is hit or miss because I've owned them for so long. I didn't bag and board them for the first, 10 years that I had them. But my collection is okay. But this book is better than most of the books in my collection. So I was very happy about that. I got Larry to sign it, and I was thrilled. And over the last 10 years, I've added to that. Bob McLeod, who did the inking for that cover, I met, who was a wonderful gentleman. Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief for Marvel for this book, and at that time, I met him and got him to sign it. Sorry, this is a long story, but what I'm trying to tell you is that I came into a conundrum, because if you're not familiar with the grading process, if you send a book into CGC, considered the most prominent grading comic book service out there, and they didn't see you sign the book, they won't give you credit for it. They'll do you one better. They want to make you feel bad about it. If you send it in and they didn't see it, they'll send it back and say, hey, your book's a 9.0, and in the notes it'll say, somebody wrote Larry Hama on this book. like it's out of a Saturday Night Live sketch or a Monty Python bit they just couldn't be like, has writing on it. They wrote, like if I wrote CGC sucks, they would write, somebody wrote CGC sucks on this book. Its book is graded to 0.0, unrelated. I was immediately like, I can't handle that. I don't want to send in a book, get it graded, and then have it be, and basically be like worthless essentially because they didn't see the signatures because I got them signed at a time where it wasn't a thing. And so there's a opposing comic book company. I would consider these guys to be the number 2 most reputable comic book graders, and they're called CBCS. And CBCS is a very similar service in every way. I have heard ups and downs in terms of the quality, but I hear that their grading is more accurate and their holders are superior in quality, but their labels are not as attractive, and if you do go to sell it, people are less likely to pay a premium for a non-CGC book. That's fine. I wasn't planning on selling it, or I don't want it to be sold until I'm dead, and then when that happens, I don't really care what's going on with it. So CBCS offers a verification authentication, and that means basically they send it in, they have a guy that's an expert at signatures, they compare it all to signatures that are on file, and they'll make a call either way. If they think it's real, they'll validate it, and then it can be validated, and it comes back in a case that specifically says these signatures have been authenticated by CBCS. And I thought, okay, this is basically my only route. This is my best case scenario. So I sent it in. You can send it in and say, hey, if you guys can't validate it, I understand, but don't go any further. Don't charge me to grade it. Just send it back and I'll deal with it. So I thought my worst case scenario was not that it would come back a low grade. My worst case scenario was that they wouldn't be able to authenticate one of the signatures. Well, they emailed me and they said, hey, it's moved on to the encapsulation process. So at that point, I knew it had passed all 3 signature verifications, so we're good to go. Today, the book came in via FedEx, has been returned to me, and I am so pleased to tell you that this beautiful book, one of the premium books in my collection, was graded a 9.4.
That's awesome.
Well, far exceeds what I expected. I'm kind of surprised that, people that collect graded books are pretty particular. I'll put it like that. There are people that are like 9.8 or nothing, because 9.8 is considered basically a perfect book, because 10s are so rare that they're just like, it's like a unicorn. People pay $500+ for a 10 that it went on sale today. Like, it's just that they say that the printing process itself is enough to damage the book. So some people would look down on a 9.4, but let me tell you, based on my collection, a 9.4 is like one of the best looking books I've probably got. So I'm ecstatic. It passed the verification process. It's unlikely that I was ever going to be able to get anybody else to sign it anyway, because Herb Trimpe passed away and he did the cover art and the interiors. So I feel like I got it, all the major names on it. And now it's encapsulated. It looks great. It's graded great. It looks great. I have somewhere where I'm going to put it actually out on display. It's not just to go away in a box. I'm just saying, hey, this is my beautiful book that I bought. And it's just got 10 years with me, nowhere near the history of some books in my collection, but we've gone down a road together. I got all these signatures obtained in person. I don't know. I love stuff like that. And I love, I'm getting into grading a little bit to protect the books I love the most. And this is where I felt like it was the most important place to start. And I had a great experience with it. They'll tell you all kinds of horror stories about both companies losing books getting damaged in transit. They get lost for 3 or 4 years. I had this back to me, in under 3 weeks. So I give them a pretty high recommendation. And yeah, I love it. I've got some other pretty rare books that I foolishly, as you can tell by my story, I was like, sign this 21, sign this 155. Like, he signed every book that truly is worth money. So I am going to follow up with CBCS and submit at least those 2 books, right? The other 2 hot books. And if they come, again, it doesn't really matter if they come back a mid to low grade. It's this point more just about protecting the books that are the most important to me in my collection. And I've got some non-G.I. Joe stuff I'm getting ready to send off to CGC. Yeah, pretty exciting. Sorry for the long story. I feel like it was a journey to get this book to where it is, and I'm pretty happy to have done so. Jaren, I think that covers it for me. Have you gotten anything in recently that you'd like to talk about?
So the only other thing that I've really purchased, other than just a weird amount of comic books, is I got the Walmart exclusive Storm Shadow and Zartan. But I have yet to open those, so I don't really have any input other than, yay, another Zartan and Storm Shadow, because I already have multiples of those. Yeah.
I picked those up also because I guess I missed a pre-order opportunity, or maybe I had talked myself out of it at the time, and then I talked myself into it. I didn't open mine either, but I will say that I think that this Storm Shadow is better than the regular release. I think this Zartan is worse. So I might open this Storm Shadow and put the other one away, but the sleeveless look for me is where it's at. I am glad that this line is, as I understand it, done. That Walmart exclusives are moving on to something else in the next, whatever the next phase is going to be. But yeah, it doesn't break my heart to be able to pass on these now, because I didn't really enjoy hunting them down then, and I don't really feel any sense of gratification when I get them usually now. Maybe that gung ho because his paint scheme was corrected, and I felt like that was a pretty important part.
Yeah, the only thing that I have about those is they were shipped to my old house. Luckily, I shipped them to a friend. My friend bought that house, so he texted me and said, "You have a Hasbro box here." And I was like, oh, cool, I got action figures. And I honestly had forgot that I had pre-ordered them through Hasbro. It had taken that long, I guess. And it was like one of those things where I was like, I don't know what I'm getting. It was like Christmas. I opened it up and I was like, oh. Okay.
Magic. Joe Fest is this weekend coming up, and obviously Jaren and I will not be there, unfortunately. It's just, it's a hard thing for us to plan logistically. I say every year I'm going to try, and I do try, but Kentuckiana is just a month away from now, or basically, and that is obviously the show that we go. That's the show that I go all in on. I'm still, if you're a longtime listener, you'll know I went into pretty serious debt for Winterfest, and I can be perfectly transparent with you, my friends, and say that I am not even close to digging myself out of that debt. So a good motivator to not go to Joe Fest is to try to get my funds under control so I can go crazy at Kentuckiana. So yeah, I look forward to some coverage from it, just like you guys do as well. And I'm excited for everybody that's going to be there. You guys have a good time, because I will have my head buried in the sand, as I'll always do this weekend, where I truly wish I was there with, the people that share the love for the thing that I love the most also. We'll be back in 2 short weeks. We'll confirm that I was right about the HasLab, and we'll see if our predictions are anywhere near close to what the reality is. And we'll, get caught up on some other stuff that's coming up as well. We have a exclusive behind the scenes discussion with the guys that are running Kentuckiana for their 10th year. So we look forward to talking to them about the prep and, what's gone into the history of their show, what we're expecting this year. That'll be a pretty big deal for us. And it's an event for us. So we make it an event for you guys as well. So there'll be lots of coverage from that this year. But in the meantime, have a great time at Joe Fest. Have a great time reading and buying your G.I. Joes. And we'll talk to you again in 2 short weeks, where anything's available for discussion here on Anything Joes.